Rank the albums. Here's how this one's gonna work. Things from my CD collection that would not be eligible for a full video, pause for eligibility, but that I nonetheless wholeheartedly advocate. And let's say they're British things. If there's something you expected to see here that I didn't cover, maybe it's coming up later, maybe I just don't have any insights for it. It might be Irish. Is it Irish? Or maybe I don't like it that much. No danger of that here. Let's start off confidently with one of the most underappreciated Britpop adjacent acts. The Longpigs only lasted for 2 albums, probably all the drugs, but they're hugely worthwhile and you can find a lot of value in the B-sides too. So it starts here with a barnstorming debut of just wild, kind of drunken rock and roll, but drunk on power, on talent. He's got a brilliant voice, and I mean that both in the literal and the figurative way. And there's a pleasing, elegant anarchy to it. It's angsty, passionate rock with a wordsmith and virtuoso, way overdriven guitar. There's a primitive power to how hard this band hits, but that's not all they do. This has a bit of debut-itis, like it sags when you get past the singles, but it does pick back up to an overall largely astonishing debut. And then a textbook disappointing follow-up, and the textbooks are actually wrong. I was wrong on my first listen, it took me a while to get this. I guess my tastes weren't all that refined back in '99. There's a fake-out first single where they sound the laddiest they've ever been, and that might have been unforgivable if the rest of it was like that, but it works well in context. Because on the whole, this album is a very hazy come-down. It's got kind of trip-hop elements to it, and I usually wouldn't like that. But it's arranged and approached and narrated with such intelligence. It's more of the lyrical melodrama of a self-involved little fuck-up, but that's the point of it. The writer knows he's a fuck-up. This does some things I've not heard elsewhere in music, but also there's a slinky, filthy, humping song, and one of the best examples of Britpop disco, and some real heartbreakers. I can understand why someone wouldn't be as much into this one, especially someone into a rock band format and into this debut album, but in my experience, it's actually gone atop. It's a tragedy that there's so little to show for this career. Going back a bit, the Adverts debut album. You know, I've not got enough to say about this. That's okay, I'll take it. The Adverts debut hasn't been celebrated enough. Here's a version of punk with a level of self-awareness that makes it timeless. The second one, which I've spent a long time failing to get a CD copy of because I don't want to pay £20, is an apt sequel to punk, stylistically upgraded, some kind of post-version of punk, with keyboard lines bringing a more ornate approach to simplicity that audiences just didn't tune into. Half of it matches up, and the rest makes up for the lost urgency with histrionics. TV Smith has made a lot more music. Back to the Britpop era and Elcka. I never quite knew. I think it's Elcka. Even the side of the case gets it wrong. Come and focus. Both sides. That's an absolutely terrible album cover, but the only bad thing about it, of things from the Britpop wave, and I don't really believe in Britpop as a genre, this is the music hall version. No, don't go. That's a good thing. There's a playful cabaret to this, and extensive instrumentation that others might have chickened out from. That all backs up some cheeky, compelling songwriting. There is some of the strengths of Longpigs in this, in the kind of power to the performance. Great little debut. Technically there is another album. It didn't exactly get released except on a webpage that I'm probably the most frequent visitor to. I don't know if it's just unfinished, but it doesn't match up to this. Jump forward to when poptimism briefly seemed like a good concept. If you want to bring back that time, put on Kish Mauve. There's one that sounds a lot like Soul Wax, and I wonder if anyone's pointed out that it sounds a lot like Soul Wax, so I looked up and it was me that pointed out that it sounds a lot like Soul Wax. Fun pop in that well-crafted way that some of the Londoners get to do. Kind of belongs with Little Boots, maybe The Knife. Maybe it's not quite that significant, but it shouldn't be as forgotten as it is. Really getting obscure, the Pecadiloes, terrible band name. This kind of guerrilla indie rock, very young, real nice choice of sounds, but honestly their best work didn't get onto the album. But it is on YouTube, because some fans are good archivists. Now a similar approach, but kind of more overdrive, more sound from trance or industrial, or whatever we call pop will eat itself. Grebo, is that still Grebo? Yeah, sure, this is Grebo. He's a yelpy vocalist, but the rest of this is great. There's an idea on here that Lady Gaga stole, but she definitely never heard this. Kinda, if you want a mix of trance music and good music, Inaura. See, I've just remembered this one. Trash Fashion. They had a novelty song with a YouTube video that I enjoyed, so I checked out the album and it's full of enjoyable novelty songs. You could call this new rave, but it feels like they were never part of that scene because they actually were into rave.
But with instruments and melody.
It's obnoxious, but it's obnoxious fun. They were performance. I'm not sure if this is what the album cover looks like or if this is just a blank one that a child has scribbled on. But some synth indie pop with the sensibilities of like New Order and Human League, but with concise observational aphorisms. Debut syndrome, that's a big quality divide between the great songs and the other songs, but they sorted that out for the next one. This one's a real moment for me. I go to Manchester quite a lot and I often put this on. If I'm careful it doesn't make me cry. I mean, it's not exactly cry-making music. Whatever, you'll probably hear it without the trauma. Or maybe it's something about that like lost nostalgia vibe to it that's just nailed here. Considering how difficult it was for a band of this stature to stay afloat, they really brought their A-game to the second album. Most of these songs are in my head a lot, lines from them are part of my general lexicon. Oh, they dropped the words from their band name that made it a terrible band name, but now it's just a band name that's very difficult to Google. But technicalities like that have nothing on the music and the lyrics, which are essential.
Ignore this one though.
Well, I'm here, there's a similar vibe from White Rose Movement, just from elsewhere in England. Oh crap, I said British. Are all of these English? I do like Welsh and Scottish music. So if I'm comparing this to performance, what performance have is more elegance. These guys are more like militants, wildcards. It's got some singles that you'd fully believe were hits around the Franz Ferdinand block party time, but the charts don't really believe that. But never mind all that, because it's great music. A bit debut syndrome, whatevs, love it. Come back in time with me. Everyone knows that the Buggles have a brilliant single. Few know that the rest of the album completely stands up to that. This really should be revered alongside like Bowie works. It's genre-savvy sci-fi electro-rock, kind of post-punk, but quite early for post-punk. Absolute innovators. Ultimately, Trevor Horn has made the mark he wanted to make on music history. The best of it's here. This album should be worshipped. The Follow Down? It's still a version of their great idea, but the lightning's escaped the jar. I can put that there, but if I really wanted, I could include a lot more because of the way this band was absorbed into the lineup of Yes. Not gonna. Does that mean I'll do a Yes video? No.
It's kind of more accurate to say that one Yes album belongs to the Buggles and has more participation from them as a duo than the actual second one. But it's still just exhausting, and that level of ambition dismantled Buggles too.
Okay, back to sophisticate Britpop support bands. Ballroom have the grace and eloquence and passion that their band name is going for. They didn't last long enough to actually make a classic, but it's a good debut, and a middling finale and one. That might be the best time to segue to Luxembourg, who only actually got one album released. I'll get to that in a bit. As Talitec's comrades, they turned up a bit late for how they sound, but would have absolutely stormed the 90s. It's a pick and mix of elements from British music. The kind of synths that might be at a rave, indie guitars, and soulful, yearning vocals from an absolutely gorgeous voice. Kind of a Smiths for the new century. Kind of a Smiths for good people. I almost got through it without comparing them to another band. The album's good, but there's so much great material that's not on the album that I don't really distill it down to this. This is just one compilation of their tracks. Here's another one with an odd story. I saw them live in that London in the number on the screen right now, and they did at long last have a new single to distribute. But also on the merch table was a stack of these, which is a bootleg compilation of their non-album tracks. As a notorious devotee, they first suspected me of leaving these there. It honestly wasn't me. I picked up a copy. I think they still don't know who it was, but they're probably watching this section. Thanks. I know Bootleg Homebrew doesn't count for ranking the albums. You can just find the tracks online. That's what you do these days, isn't it? The kids. That's what the kids do. They download MP3s to keep on their iPods. So I do recommend Front, but I mainly recommend Luxembourg. If we're really breaking it down to individual planned releases, there was meant to be a second album that I hosted the online version of for a good few years. It's not the sound of a finished album, but there's good ideas on it. And if that London is Blue EP counts, then that's some of the best. There's loads more music career between the members of Luxembourg because that is just a very creative London scene that is lifelong passionate about music. Respect from the Midlands. Okay, Just Before Suede in my alphabetized collection is a band that would have really liked being Just Before Suede in my alphabetized collection.
With an oddly identical voice to Bernard Butler. Yeah, Bernard.
I don't much enjoy the debut album. They at least had the incredible prescience of having Richard Osman on the cover, and Boris Johnson and Job Bluth. Oh, Bernie Sanders. Is this from the future? Anyway, they followed that up with some filthy, sleazy sounds. If you dig Coming Up by Suede, get this one as well. The lyrics are so naughty, but it's that delectable 90s glam wave that I just can't resist. Going so bright, so pop, so glam, specifically for your second album is a brave move, but they absolutely pull it off. I think if this wasn't their second one, and if it wasn't in the era when bands have to tail off and lose their record deal after an underpromoted second album, more people might have heard of this. It fully deserves it. Just wondering if the band Smash is gonna be in this. The Slits. Well, we're on the sleazy post-Britpop glam wave, King Adora. Molester music for the sweatiest eyeliner. They're not original, they're not clever, they're not pretty, they don't want to be. They want to knock your door down, and this is what this debut does. Start to end, no debut syndrome, it just absolutely pummels all the way through. It's a masterpiece, and you might need a shower. Then, a half-baked second one. Like, low graphic design budget and low music budget, low music effort. Yeah, you don't notice for the first couple of tracks, they're good. But then it really sags, and his once screaming voice is now kind of croaking. For an out-of-control live band, this debut provided the sheen and the 400 takes it took to make them presentable. They went without that here, and without the determination. Just sounds like some dodgy hair metal demos. So obviously there's a black and white distinction here. I've only just learned that King Adora wasn't married to Queen Adrena. And right next to them in the alphabet is Kinesis. Unintentionally, if Kinesis wanted to be next to anyone, it was the Manics, who is who King Adora would have wanted to be next to. There was an introductory EP that I did once have the CD of, but I didn't like how it sounds, the music on it. They were really young and they needed to get that juvenilia out of the way before they could get to this stuff. It's a debut album of almost this excellence, but a lot more to say. Just a whiff of debut-itis, but the political determination of this band. I've always admired political bands and their commitment to saying something with meaning that challenges the injustices of the world. If they are as big Mannix fans as they sound, then they've lived up to the potential of that. Put that on some real fast pyrotechnic music and you've got a Generation Terrorist that's better than Generation Terrorists. But I shouldn't mention the Mannix all that much because they moved on to ripping off Muse. Yeah, there was a moment when everyone heard Muse and realised they wanted to be Muse. Kinesis lacks the vocal chops for that and is from more of a punk aesthetic, so it's better. But this is a bit silly in places and they'd already lost their record deal. They weren't gonna last and they weren't gonna match up. I do still love it though. Not quite a black and white decision, just some very differing greys. Bit of a break from format because this band definitely had enough works for me to do a full episode on them, it's just this is the only one that's any good. Very good though, bit of a Manson prog ELO, are they called ELO? The very plain lyrics and vocals let this one down, but the music is great enough for that not to matter, on the debut at least. I didn't yet bother hearing past their first three, which would go like this. Maybe there's something to reassess now, but honestly, I'd rather just put the first one on. Ooh, good band, bad dude. I've had a mostly complete script for a bonus track episode about the morality of music by bad people, so you can look forward to another white person's take on separating the art from the artist. Maybe I'll just say this in that video. 2 special editions that really stand out on my shelves. Honestly, I don't love them enough to justify the special editions, but I already made that leap. All the content across the discs is good quality though. The first one sets up the Marion vibe, which is suave Britpop done fast. You'll dig every minute of this when it's on, and then you won't bother to put it on again. There's a bicker to his idiolette that maybe makes the band unique and maybe undermines the hooks. Truthfully, maybe just the first disc is enough, but the rest of it is almost as good of the same. That kind of describes both of them. The second one's strength is concentrated into one particular song, but a good general vibe, so that way. There are some more recent Marion recordings, but I'm not really interested in that kind of person. Japanese Voyeurs, just for the length of one album and a few B-sides, carried the torch of Nirvana, updated that savage rage, hit like an avalanche. It's got those Kinderhor vocals that both convey and parody sexuality. You know I'm 90s oriented, this might be the last 90s sound. It's got the riffs, it's got the violence, it's got the whole package. This needs to be heard. Then one of the biggest names but smallest careers of Britpop. There's famously bits of other people's songs in this, maybe a bit more than we should accept, but Connection is much better than that Wire song, and they're just a real post-punk band, emphasis on the punk set in the 90s. With loads of tracks across little duration, this is like a sketch show that's on great form. Belated Followed Out starts really well, but then you hear all the rest of the songs that they scrapped together to have something that was album length. It's not really a full band work, it resorts to some plain instrumentals and 12-bar blues. This album would make an awesome single, and that's how it goes. Let's go flat. Estrons didn't last beyond stuffing their few tracks onto an album. They sounded good live, but on record it's got a choppy sound, compressed vocals, self-sabotage, a waste. Real promise, but nothing more. I'm not quite close enough to Leeds or anywhere close enough to Lads to be the Crips' original audience, but then they decided to make a record that sounds good. Everything's tightened, not beyond charm, just sharpened. They've got relevant things to say, quite
quite feminist, deeply earning your attention landmark indie. A follow-up that just brings everything, including a new brother, upping the extremes. I'm struggling so much to put above or below this that I'm breaking a rule just for this episode, and then I just couldn't maintain attention when they went mealy-mouthed again. Milk Teeth took a few years calibrating, retooling, realizing who in the band should actually have a mic across a few EPs in this first album. Starts off well, but heavily varies per track depending on who's singing. But then by the time of album 2, they could have swapped band name and let us know they had something as good as this ready as a vital reinvention. But being released in 2020, it had to function as an intolerable dwindle, and they couldn't stay bandly. If you liked this video, that's on you.